Okay, so welcome everybody to this edition of the Southern Fried DNN Meetup, coming to you live from Charlotte, North Carolina at the Microsoft campus. So a big shout out to Microsoft for being our sponsor and continuing to allow us to come and use their facilities for the meetings for local. And welcome to all the online participants tonight and those of you that may be watching the replay afterwards. I know many of you over in the other side of the pond there will always be kind of joining us after the fact and replay. So welcome to you guys. Big shout out to our European crowd. Tonight we've got a special treat, and we're going to get to some of that in just a minute. We've got a few things. Actually, I see that we have Mandeep online with us tonight, so big shout out to Mandeep for giving us a license use of the Porto theme for DNN that runs the Southern Fried DNN website, so thank you very much.
Both Porto and Live Blog.
That's right. Good point. Actually, we're using live form as well. So absolutely. Live form, live blog, and Porto. So thank you so much, Mandeep, for your generosity there. You guys, please visit these sponsors and give them some love there. So it would be great. And, you know, I just realized we don't have Mandeep's listed in our sponsors here, so we need to get you added there on our Meetup site. Yeah, he's on our website, but not on the Meetup site. So I need to get that added in there. I think that's it for the sponsors. The announcements are kind of few tonight. We have, I think, let's see, what did I pull up here?
Are you able to move that camera, the video off of the...
Oh yeah, good point, good point. Let me move the video here so we can see. It's just, I'll actually blow it up when we get started there so everybody here in the room can see. And Clint, I'm drawing a blank on the one that you mentioned that we should mention announcements-wise. What was the one that you said?
Skin.
Yeah, I've got those. And
WinHub,
well, that would be a good one to say. Yeah, actually, that's a good follow-up from last month's presentation. Nick Caliani joined us and was talking a bit about a new venture there called WinHub, and they just recently launched their beta. I think it was like yesterday. Yeah, let's do that. That was winhub.com, I believe, and my mouse is being finicky. They just launched the beta on this, I believe it was yesterday or day before. So for Approach, it's an app essentially that you can use to track your friends or enemies if they agree to it in going to a location. And it's pretty slick, very, very nice interface. And we used it here tonight, actually coming to the meetup, and it was really nice to see that in action for once and kind of get a status on all your friends, you know, converging on one spot, and you can change your approach and monitor their location so that you don't have to continually text while driving, and hopefully you're not doing that anyway. But we're all tempted to do that from time to time, or making phone calls. So now you have a nice little app you can kind of watch everybody's location as you arrive. So congratulations to Nick and his team for launching that, and thank you for the intro into the machine learning last month. That was really cool.
DNN Connect was on.
Yeah, that's right. That's what it was. DNN Connect. Yeah. So events that are coming up. We've got DNN Connect that's coming up. That I'll pull up that site as well here. It is coming up June the 2nd through the 5th in Girona, Spain, and I know I am looking forward to that event. I've never been to a DNN Connect, so I'm going to be the newbie, but you can get there from dnn-connect.org, go under events, and see the 2016 event here, and I believe there is still time to register for those of you that might be able to do that. So please join us over there. It's going to be a great event, and looking forward to seeing a lot of old friends and making new ones. Let's see, next on the buzz in the community, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Jeff Barlow, who recently made a couple of really nice community contributions. One that he made, you can find these on the DNN store. I should probably pull up the newest version here. But this is the DNN Bootster theme, and it's built off of Bootstrap and is free as an open source project. You can find it on GitHub as well. And Jeff's done a really nice job on this one and is taking feedback from the community. As well, he has launched another theme recently that is called DNN M Design. And I'm not sure if that one's on the store just yet, but you can get to the blog out on the DNN software community forum area or the blog area. And just look for Jeff Barlow, and you'll find his recent entry about this one. This is actually a pretty phenomenal theme. We've used it a couple of times already in our business, so we're excited about this. And again, this is also on GitHub, and he's actively monitoring that and making updates to it and taking community feedback. It's actually a beautifully designed theme that's still built off of Bootstrap, but it's with a material design concept kind of on top of it. So very nicely done.
I've got another announcement. I've heard rumors.
Speak up, Clint, so we can hear.
I've heard rumors that Ralph Williams is prepping to drop a blog series. I don't know when.
Oh, snap.
Module development. So
Semicolon.
I just want to drop that teaser out there and peer pressure on Ralph.
So there you have it, folks. We now have Ralph Williams, who is fully committed to releasing
Tweet at him.
a wonderful new blog series. And what was the topic of the blog series?
Like Intro to SPA module
Intro to SPA module development. So great.
And that's going to be done in May?
In May, yeah, that's right. I think he's committed to that as well. Well, we'll see.
If it doesn't make it, it's probably one intro to the SPA. It's a little bit shorter.
That'd be great. We'll look forward to that. We know how well Ralph can write, and I know he's learned a lot on the SPA front there, so we'll look forward to that. So let's see. I think that is it for the announcements. Does anybody else have anything that's going on in the community that they want to just give a quick shout out for or a mention of? Joe, do you want to mention anything about DNN 9? Just kidding. Sorry.
Yes, it will be out this year. We do have a release that will be coming up this summer. I'm not sure yet the exact date. It's tentatively scheduled for mid-June. But you know, as always, release dates are a little bit tentative until you get a little bit closer and everything's locked down and we know we're in final testing mode, which we're not there yet. So.
Excellent. So I guess without further ado, we'll flip over into our main presentation for tonight, and we are excited and glad to have Joe Brinkman with us again. Joe, for those of you that do not know him, is one of the co-founding members of DNN Corp and is actively involved and engaging with the community from a corp perspective, and he is going to be sharing some really exciting stuff tonight, which if any of you did go to DNN Connect in Baltimore last month at the beginning of April, he did an Ignite session that you may recognize the first slide from this up here, but thinking outside of the DNN box. So tonight we're going to have the pleasure of getting a little bit more deeper dive into some of those concepts. So we look forward to that. And Joe, without further ado, we will turn it over to you, and I'll give you presenter privileges here. And I will give you presenter privileges here, and I will give you yeah. There we go. That should be over to you there now. So thanks for joining us, Joe.
Yep. Well, happy to be here, David. Always glad to come and present to the group. So we're going to talk tonight about thinking outside the DNN box. And this was originally a Ignite session. I think people liked the session and went pretty well, and so I'm actually doing this session again at DNN Connect. So this is basically a dry run for the longer version, now that I've got a little bit more than 5 minutes to cover an entire topic. So we'll dive into some examples tonight and look at things a little more in depth. And really what the point of this session is I want you to start thinking differently about how you build for DNN. You know, we all get sort of set in our ways about what DNN requires, and you have to do this and you have to do that. And I think too often that limits the types of things that we do. And often what you find is that if you dig a little deeper, that many of the perceived limitations are just that. They're perceived limitations, are not actual limitations. So we're going to talk about maybe a little bit different way that you can build modules for DNN. And so we'll dig into that just a little bit here. So if I can get my screen. So historically, you know, DNN presents this visual interface that many developers feel like is very constraining, right? It was nice. It gave you nice guide rails, you know, said, oops, why do I have these auto advances? So
nice Ignite.
You had these containers. What's that?
Nice Ignite advances there going on.
Yes, I probably, and I thought I had removed them, but apparently they're still there. So give me a second. I'm going to remove those so we don't have this throughout.
Are we still doing the Grandpa Brinkman technical issue shot game?
Absolutely. Will you be the master of ceremonies for that?
I'll definitely remind everybody when it's time to have the shot.
Perfect.
Yeah, so it looks like it's still auto-advancing on some of my animation. So we have these containers and these panes and these modules in our layout, and that's really nice for giving us, you know, a nice visual presentation for the page and a nice way to compose the page in a DNN site. But too often developers see that those guides as those are hard and fast, you can't ever break out of that. And I think too often that constrains the way we think about module development, it constrains the way we think about site development in DNN. And really the point of this is that those are just guidelines. You can break out of that. You can do some interesting things within the context of DNN, even as a module. So one of the things that I've seen a lot recently is I've seen a number of developers who are starting to take and break out of container space. They're breaking out of the panes. They're no longer limited by whatever panes that someone may have put in the skin, and they're taking up the screen real estate that they need in order to present the UI that they want to present. And some of them have pretty interesting dynamics within DNN to do that. I think the ones that I really have found, and there were some great examples of that in the recent DNN module contest. And you know, there are lots of different ways you can break out of those boundaries. So let's take a look at a couple of the modules that we have from the contest and see how some of our developers in the community right now are sort of breaking those boxes, breaking out of those boundaries. So I've just got a couple of examples here, and the first one we're going to look at is a tool called DNN Dev Tools. And the first thing to notice is I come to my website, I've got this little bug that's down here in the bottom right-hand corner of the website, if you can see that okay. And occasionally I'll get a pop-up saying something has happened in that. But an interesting thing happens if I click on this and go to look at the content of the module. It will actually do a full screen paint, lay its UI over the top of my website. If you look underneath, my website is still back there, right? I can still scroll and stuff. but its UI sort of gets laid over the top, right? And so by taking full control, not only does he have more real estate, but he also can do some interesting things in terms of his UI, because he's no longer worried about what does a skin look like, what does this page look like. He can present a UI that maybe is a little more modern or a little different than the website without completely feeling awkward in the website, right? Because effectively this is, for all intents and purposes, a pop-up within the context of the website. So you can go into that and get right back out and be right where you were. You don't lose context, right? And this can follow you around to any page in the website. If I go to my site settings or anyplace else, right, that bug is going to follow us through the website. And again, it's installed just like any other module would be installed. But as I navigate around the site, if I'm an administrator, and in this case I'm a super user, it's going to follow me around the site and let me do some of the looking at logs and looking at different things that may be relevant to what I'm doing in the site. So that's the first one. Second one I wanted to look at is one called...
who built that?
Yeah.
Sorry, we were muted.
So this one was built by, I believe, Jan Jonas and another guy from Germany. A company called WeWeave, I think, is the company that they have. And so that's the DNN Dev Tools. And all of these are available up on GitHub. And there are links from the module contest, all of these on DNN software. So the second one, I'm going to kill this first one just so it'll stop spinning there. So the second one we're going to look at is one called DNN, or My DNN Live Chat. And so this one is interesting. When you drop the module on the page, all you're going to get is a little button. I should have warmed these sites up. I apologize for that. So when you come to this one, all you get is this button on the page, right? Doesn't look like there's anything really there. As an admin, though, I can come into this, and again, he's going to give me more of a full screen experience, and so that he can take more administrative control over what the UI looks like. Notice this clearly is not a typical DNN UI, and you can come in here, manage settings. If you notice, everything, he uses a lot of Ajax here, a lot of post-back functionality, very nice looking UI. But again, he's taken up that full screen, and so in this case, you don't even see DNN underneath the covers, right? And again, this is another one of those cases where they pop up a support UI over the top of your website. So as you're navigating around the website, I'll go back here to our home page. As you navigate around the website, assuming I didn't turn something off when I was over there, you normally would get a little support pop-up that would show up here. Here we are. And right now the support guys aren't online, so I can leave a message or whatever. But assuming that support was there, I would get this whole overlay on my site, and I could chat live interactively with the support reps. And again, this all is done and doesn't take you out of the context of DNN. When you exit that screen, you come back to where you were. As you can see with the messaging, that all overlays over the top of your website. So very nice UI on that one. And again, notice that at no point were we really constrained by what the panes were or what the container might have been in a particular spot. This last one we're going to look at is called View Manage, and this one is even a little bit different from the perspective of when you drop the module on the page, it effectively takes over the entire page. So if I click on this View Manage page where I've already installed the module, I won't actually see the underlying DNN page at all. The underlying DNN page is the uManage module. We'll give DNN, this website, a second to spin up here. Oh, as soon as we get a login. And again, interesting thing, in this case, he's taken over most of the page, but notice that the control panel is still there at the top of the page. And again, very much an Ajax sort of UI, right? I can go in, things flip over, I can do fast edits, right? I get a really nice pop-up, do role management, whatever on the site, you know, filter things. I can find just the wills, the real will, and then will stroll. So we can, you know, so a very nice fluid interface, but again, not constrained by maybe what the DNN admin UI looks like, and not constrained by how we lay out things on the typical DNN site, right? So those are some examples that I'm seeing out there now of people who are breaking outside of that box and really trying to push things in a little bit different direction. But boxes in DNN, you know, if you think about it a little bit, DNN installation itself is a box as well, right? Everything we've talked about so far is a module that gets installed inside of DNN that runs in the context of that server, which means it's impacted dramatically by the speed and performance of that server, how much memory that server has, how finely tuned that DNN website is. All of those things have direct impact on your module and the things that you're installing inside DNN. So that those, again, are boxes that constrain the way people think about delivering applications in the context of DNN. And it's not something that I think necessarily needs to be there. It's something that you can relatively easily break out of. So when you think about it, all of those boxes that we talked about, they really constrain the way developers look at problems and the way that they look at solutions. And what we really want to do is say, how do we get rid of all of those constraints? How do we get rid of the constraints that DNN imposes? How do we get rid of those containers and those panes? How do we get rid of necessarily having to have huge beefy servers for the DNN install, and we don't know how well our module is going to run in a limited memory server installation. And so what we want to do is really sort of free our minds from those constraints and start thinking differently about how we build modules. So if you think about it for a second, think about Google Analytics, right? Google Analytics has this awesome API that you can use for logging all of this data. But what most people don't know is that same API you can leverage to embed graphs and charts and reports all within your website. But all of the code for where that data is coming from, how those graphs and charts get generated, all of that runs on Google's infrastructure, right? Your website actually has very little direct impact on how those charts and things look, right? You have some control based on the API, but your website itself, the CSS and all the other things on your website really don't impact that a whole lot, which is part of what we look for as web developers, right? How can I have control over what my thing looks like, and maybe give a little bit of control in terms of theming or what have you to maybe fit inside the website. But ultimately, we want things to look the way we want them to look for our modules and development. Another one that we'll look at here in a little bit is one called Wufoo. And Wufoo is a form tool. It's an online form tool, SaaS form tool, and you can use it to embed forms in pretty much anything. And we'll look at that one a little more in depth here in a minute. This last spring at the Build conference, Microsoft made a couple of surprise announcements and some new things that they released, and that really, I think, when you go and look at them, really show the ability and how rich development you can build without actually having to touch the underlying server itself. So if you've been to, let's say, Outlook.com, if you have an Outlook.com account, Live.com or Hotmail.com, whatever URL you want to use there, you'll have noticed over the last couple of months that you actually have access to Skype directly within the web page. And one of the things that Microsoft announced was this Skype embedded, where you can actually embed Skype directly within your website. So it's not limited to just being available on Outlook.com. You can actually build out as much or as little of the Skype interface as you want and embed that within your website and have full Skype functionality directly on your website. The other one that they announced was one called Power BI Embedded. And we're going to look at this one a little more in depth as well. So let's think about what that might look like. So if you look at all of these, or at most of these solutions, many of them can be created or can be done with a bare bones DNN SPA module type, right? So if you think about what is really the bare bones module that we can build. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. We're going to do a quick demo, and I'm going to pull up my Visual Studio here, or Visual Studio Code, and I'm just going to create a new module, right? So and I'll zoom in here a little bit so people can see. Can everyone see that okay, hopefully?
Yeah, that's good.
Looks good.
And I'm just going to create a new folder here, and I'm going to call it Simple Form. And then inside that Simple Form, I'm going to create the absolutely smallest possible module. I'm going to call it view.html. And we will go and let me go and grab some. Oh, I don't have it open. Give me a second. I just need to grab code snippet here. Sorry. And so what I want to do is I want to grab Wufoo. So if I go to Wufoo and I look up Wufoo, that form application, what we'll find is that they have in their forms, right, I can go in, I can look at the form, see what that form is going to look like. So I've got a form here, it's just a suggestion form. What I want to do is I want to actually embed that form on my website, right? And so I'm going to embed it. You can do it with JavaScript or iframe, what have you. So I'm just going to use this JavaScript version here. And I've already copied that out and pasted that in here. So I've got this view.html, and that's all it is. It's just that stuff that I had from Wufoo. If I'd have used the iframe, it would have been an iframe instead of all this JavaScript. Either one works just fine. So I've got a view.html. The only other thing that's required for a DNN website or for a DNN module is to have a manifest file, right? So a manifest file and a view or a control, however you want to look at it. And I've already got a manifest sitting here, and I'll paste that in. And if we look at that, really all this is the name of my package, who owns it, release notes, nothing there, dependencies, and then I have in my module, I just have a single module control which points to that Oops, this is wrong here. I changed the name of that folder. And I just have this simple HTML view, right? This is the absolute bare minimum that I need in order to have a module. We'll go ahead and save that simple form manifest. And now I can come to my website. So I've got a website here that I've got set up. I'm going to go into my host settings and go into extensions. And I'm going to cheat a little bit here rather than, like I could package up that DNN file and that HTML file and do an install, but I'm going to use a slightly different method to install this thing. So again, we'll wait for this site to warm up. And effectively what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell, looks like I need to log in again. Effectively what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell DNN I want to load a module or install a module, and I'm going to install a module using that manifest. Now there is a bug in the 8.0 releases of DNN, so you can't actually make it from a control if you're doing HTML or MVC. We'll fix that in one of the upcoming releases. But the manifest works just fine if we can get the login and everything to come up. This is where the Jeopardy music would be handy. There we go.
Hey, while we're waiting, you know, there was a script version from Wufoo, and there was a iframe version from Wufoo. But could you also take the WordPress version and put it into here?
Probably not, because they probably used shortcodes for the WordPress version. So in this case, I'm going to create a module from the manifest. And that module exists down here in my simple form folder. And it's going to find that manifest for me. It's going to create that module. And that's really it, right? So that DNN file and that one view was all I needed. Now that I've got my module there, we'll go ahead and let this close up. We'll come over here to my simple form page that I already built. There's nothing on it right now. And we'll just go ahead and add that new module in. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, if we had the iframe version or we had that JavaScript version, you know, why did we need to create a whole module out of this, right? We didn't have to. What I want you to see though is sort of this is the foundation for where we're going next, because this is the absolute bare minimum case, right? There are some UIs like Wufoo and others and other SaaS applications out there that you can build out using nothing more than just a snippet of JavaScript or a snippet per iframe or whatever, right? So I can go ahead and enter this and say, and just, right, save this, submit that, and everything's fine. And all of my data will end up back here in Wufoo, and so it all goes to the cloud, and then they do something else with it, right, if I want to forward it elsewhere. But so really you're seeing some interactions. Notice I've had multiple pages. So I had my form page, I had the other page after that. All of that's happening in the browser. Very easy to build that kind of module, right? But what if we wanted something a little more advanced? What if we wanted something like that Power BI? So one of the tools that Microsoft has is this thing called Power BI, which is a business intelligence, a reporting tool, a data analysis tool. And they've got a desktop version and they've got a website version of this. And so if I open my Power BI, effectively what I get is the ability to connect to various data sources and to create reports and create dashboards within Power BI. Again, I'm not sure why it's taking so long, but anyway, once I've created those, I can upload those into a workspace in Azure. So this is a workspace that I created earlier. It's one workspace. You can have as many as you want. And inside each workspace, you can upload reports, you can upload dashboards, all these different things. So I'm just going to open, just so you can see, I'm going to start with this one here. And so this is a report that's pulling data directly out of GitHub. Now they allow you to pull data from a lot of different places, and you can see it refreshing here. But I just wanted to see, you know, how many pull requests did we have, by which version of DNN, and maybe when the popular times of the day or popular days of the week are for submitting that data. So I push these reports up into that workspace up in Azure, and then I built a module. And this module's a bit more complex than what we had before. So again, I've got a view HTML, and that view HTML, in this case, what's going to happen is I'm going to call through the API and get some data out of Power BI. And I do that because I need to figure out what the list of reports are. So I'm just pulling back a list of reports here. Nothing too fancy. Let me just hide that. Zoom in a little bit here. All right, so I'm getting a report list, and I'm creating a list of items from it. And then I have this iframe down here. Now there's nothing in the iframe. Notice there's no source or anything attached to this iframe. It's just sort of sitting there. And so if I go to the website and I take a look at what does this look like, and I've already built this and posted it because it's a little more involved. So what happens is I call the service to get back a list of what reports are up there, and I've got 3 reports that we put up there previously. Right? And so effectively this is calling some JavaScript, doing a data binding, right? Typical SPA module stuff that you would see in any SPA module. In this case, I've got my report service, my report controller, and I'm going to get a list of those reports. Now, one of the things that we didn't have with Wufoo that we have with Power BI is how do you validate, how do you authenticate the user, verify that this user has access to this report or this set of workspaces, right? And so there are a couple of values here, workspace name, an ID, and an access key that are all generated off of this website, right? So here's my workspace name, here's my workspace ID, and I can click and I can get some access keys. And I'm not worried about these being taken because I'll go ahead and delete this workspace after we're done with this. So feel free to use it for the next 15 minutes. So anyway, so those are the 3 values. And normally I'd put these in on a settings page, and you could enter whatever you wanted. But effectively, that just allows me to call in, get a token, generate a Java web token or a JavaScript web token, and then I can format some things that it requires. But ultimately, all of that comes back as when I make this call here, right? It's going to bring me back some JSON that I'm going to deserialize into a list of reports. So there's not really a whole lot going on here. There's 2 or 3 calls that I have to make, or things that I have to set up to get the JWT token, and then to make the actual request call here, right, the system web request. So that's pretty simple so far, and all of that is just to get this list. Once I click on one of these, I will actually, and this is where the real power comes in, because this now is making a second request. Now that I know exactly what report I want, now I can go back out to Power BI and say, in that iframe, I want you to insert this specific report. And here's those tokens that you gave me earlier proving that I'm authenticated. And now I have this really rich report that I can use, and I can see exactly the reports that I was seeing in my desktop application. But now I don't have to have Power BI installed on my desktop. Anybody with access to this website and this page and this module, right, can now come in, take a look at this report. They can run filters on the report and do all of the stuff that I've previously configured for this report, right? So if I go, maybe I want to go look at my GitHub pull request list. It'll go back out, pull that report down, and I can run. Let's see what fixes we had just for the 8.0 release there. And again, we're running a little bit slow, but it'll come back here in a second, I'm sure. There we go. So we'll blow that up, and we'll run a quick filter on that. And here I can see, and I just want to look at 8.0 and see what users submitted and how many pull requests were submitted against the 8.0 release. So this is 437 pull requests went in, and you can see all of the people and how many they did, right? So this is just an example. Now this API is a little more complex than the one from Wufoo. Skype is likewise more complex. There's a lot more little pieces, but most of this API is all done in JavaScript. There's not a lot of this API that is actually inside of code, and in fact, less than 90 lines of code is pretty much the entire server-side piece, and you can see that probably 50% or more of that code is all comments. So really about 30-40 lines of code is really all I needed in order to build a pretty robust module. And I get all of that functionality, all of that charting functionality. The next time another report is uploaded to that server, it's going to come down and I'll see that in my list, and we'll be able to play with that, right? So this is an example of really going way beyond what you would typically see in a DNN module, and there's very little code actually running on my local box on the server, right? It's all running primarily up on Microsoft and Windows Azure. So when we think about cloud apps, and think back to that Wufoo example again, right? So if I just have that cloud HTML and maybe I've got some JavaScript, maybe there's some CSS, but really in our example, I just had that cloud HTML and that manifest file. Well, get rid of the manifest, and I could use that same code to target Drupal and WordPress and SiteCore and ASP.NET, and my application that I originally built for DNN suddenly has a lot more utility and can address a much larger group of users potentially, right? And maybe I have to write a little bit of glue code, if you will, for the different platforms, but maybe I've got to rewrite that 40 lines of code, say, for Power BI, right? So for the Power BI example, I might have an equal 40 lines of code that I need to write for Drupal and SiteCore and WordPress and all of these others, but that's a pretty small amount of code that I would need to write, and literally within a couple hundred lines of code, I've hit 5 or 6 major platforms And if you think about the traditional DNN module and how hard it would be to retarget that module at another platform or another group of users. And so that's one of the real big benefits of this sort of an approach. So really, this showed how we can leverage other people's SaaS applications. And the question is, what would that look like if we wanted to build our own? What would it look like if we wanted to take our module and move the guts of that up to the cloud and build our own SaaS module, so to speak? And effectively, Microsoft also released this spring a service called Azure Service Fabric, and you can see the link here, and we'll make sure we get the link in the release notes from the meeting tonight. But effectively, you can build these services up in the cloud. The Azure Service Fabric is specifically designed for allowing you to use a microservice architecture. So if you think about that Power BI example, there was a set of APIs I used for managing workspaces and getting a list of reports. There was another API that was used for actually displaying the reports. And if you looked under the covers at how that is all built, what you would see is that there are multiple services actually running behind the scenes up in the cloud, and they all work in conjunction to deliver that end user experience. The nice thing about microservices and what makes them a little bit different than typical module development and the patterns that we follow today is that because they're microservices, because each service that's part of that Power BI API, you can scale each of those portions of the service independently. So there might be the rendering portion of that service. You might need a lot more resources just for rendering of those reports and rendering of the filter and running that code. But maybe your service for listing out reports doesn't require, right? That's a fairly simple query engine, and it's an isolated piece of code, and that may only require one Azure node as opposed to the rendering piece for the actual report, right? So this is a pattern. We're not going to go into this in depth tonight. There will be a session at DNN Connect where we spend an entire hour just basically drilling down in to the microservice architecture and how to build microservice architecture applications. But effectively, once you figure out the microservice architecture piece or figure out the SaaS piece, because you don't have to use microservice architecture, it's just really nice when you're building SaaS applications to do this. But you could do it with a single service running in the cloud, and you just scale the whole thing up or scale the whole thing down. But it's basically being able to deliver that app in the cloud as an iframe or as a JavaScript, combine that with a small cloud module. In my case, I showed you an example with just a single HTML view, but you can have some additional things if you want to go for a more robust app that's up in the cloud. And the two things together really is the sum total of what you have to build. Now, the bulk of your logic exists in that app that's running in the cloud. And that cloud module, so to speak, that piece that we install and run on DNN, that's really just a shim, if you will, or a small interface, if you will, between the cloud and the DNN platform itself. And you can do some really advanced functions there that will tie all of that together. You can do authentication, and you can call DNN APIs and mix and match DNN APIs along with the app APIs that are running in the cloud, and all of those can be mixed together. And in fact, this is the exact model that we're using for the next version of Evoke for some of the new features that we're releasing in Evoke 9 later this summer. And we will have a portion of code that is actually a DNN module, but the bulk of the code for the features that we're releasing this summer will all be done up in the cloud. And that really allows us to scale. That also allows us to do a lot of other interesting things, right? It allows us to potentially offer features to other platforms. It allows us to scale up and down as we get more and more load. So let's say someone comes to your website and they're running tons and tons of reports. Well, you don't have to scale your server on your website up and down anymore because that can happen up in the cloud, right? And the service itself can scale up and down to handle that extra load. You can have a central place where you do centralized license management on that cloud service. You're not worried about someone bypassing it because they've got access to the source code, or they can decompile your source code on the DNN side. So you've got much better license management control. The ability to do upgrades. Think about what it's like now when someone upgrades their DNN website and sometimes those upgrades can break modules. Imagine living in a world where your module is somewhat isolated from changes that may happen within the DNN platform. So it gives you better application isolation. And then the other nice thing about building modules this way is that you can actually instrument how features are used, what part of a feature is used. Are people using your API, or is that a waste, or are people finding problems with it? So these are some of the benefits of taking sort of an alternate approach. And what I really hope you take away from tonight is not really that you should build these SaaS-based modules. I think that's a great way to go. I think the direction that the internet and the web is going today, that's certainly a unique and interesting opportunity for people. But what I really want you to take away from this session is that all of those things that we've historically perceived as limitations of the DNN platform, or as limitations of the architecture and how things are done, is that those are just perceived limitations. There's always ways to work around it, and generally it's not as hard as people make it out to be in terms of breaking out of those boxes that we put ourselves in. So with that, I want to thank everyone for joining me tonight. Thank you for having me. But we're getting close to tip-off time, so we've got to go see the 2016 NBA champions here coming up, a game here in just another hour or so. So with that, I will see you all later. Thanks.
So, Joe, you have a minute for a question or two?
Yes, actually I do.
Okay. Any questions from the room or online? I know I thought I saw one question come in online regarding GitHub, and is there any plans to have any type of sample code or anything like that, or example on GitHub for some of this?
He also asked about.
Yeah, so I am going to, all of the stuff that I showed tonight, I will be putting that up in GitHub. There's a few things I want to do before I do that with the Power BI one. That one, I do want to flesh out the settings portion. But yes, all of these will be on GitHub, and I'll send out URLs to those. The other one was Will Stroll's question about form patterns and UX patterns, and how can we enforce those. And ultimately, it's up to the module developer, right? So module developers need to create and follow their own form pattern. But as we see from various module vendors, they don't always follow the DNN form patterns. And in fact, I like sometimes that they don't. I like sometimes that they're pushing the boundaries and making us rethink what some of these UIs can look like, right? Because that helps drive the community forward as well. Often, where I want to see conformity to the form pattern and the UI UX patterns is in things where where you spend most of your time in it. I don't think there's a big problem with an administrative form here or there, maybe not conforming directly to the DNN form pattern. So I would look at, what are the primary end user facing portions and make sure that those use those patterns. But for some of the administrative stuff, I think we have to break out of the habit of thinking that they all have to look exactly alike. I know it's frustrating sometimes for people because each one looks a little bit different. Let's see.
Excellent.
Is this going to take me to a Rick roll?
It should.
Nice.
I suspected as much.
Do we have any other questions from here in the room?
From one of the earlier examples you were showing of things, I hadn't seen the uManage one before. That was the early manager one. Was that part of the DNN contest? And I just had clicked and looked.
Yes, it was. They actually won, I believe, 2, maybe just one, but they won one of the categories.
I missed it entirely. I'm going to go back and check that out.
Yeah. No, it's a very nice module.
Any other questions for Joe before he calves along?
Yeah, I know you guys aren't worried about playoffs at this point, but
yeah, we stopped worrying about it a while ago. So and when things got heated up a little bit. Well, Joe, thanks for joining us, and this is pretty exciting stuff, and really appreciate you giving us some insight on it, and we look forward to what's ahead in the future on this.
Thanks for spending time with us, Joe.
All right, so let me bring presenter back here. So I guess at this time, we've got a little bit more left in the meetup here for the last 20 minutes or so, or 25 minutes. I think Ryan is going to come up and share a little bit with us there, and please feel free to hang out, and we're going to cover some other things here. So.
Before David heads off to DNN Connect, bear with me for 2 seconds while I get a setup here. Before David heads out to DNN Connect, one of the things we were doing at one of the last user group meetings was doing a little bit of a recap of the DNN Con event. I get in a little bit late this evening, so I don't have my laptop and things set up, but I didn't have too much that I wanted to show beyond the main DNN Con website so that we could do a little bit more of a recap of some of the things that we all encountered when we were at DNN Con back at the beginning of last month. There were a couple of things about the DNN Con in Baltimore that we started to talk about. We, I believe, went through and thanked our sponsors, so I'll briefly talk about that for a second. But meanwhile, I will also pull up the Twitter feed. No, not doing that right. So as far as DNN Con was concerned, we really have to thank so much to the sponsors. And even if I did it earlier in the last session,
You can just close that.
yeah, don't have to see myself talking here. As far as the sponsors are concerned, we have to thank them for really making this happen. And I'm hoping I can get to the bottom of the page and still see the sponsors, since it's been about a week since I went there. So obviously Manage.com being one of the main sponsors that we have to give shouts out to. They really helped make the event happen. They were present from the very beginning of setup, setting up their tables and being present, but from the events, from the dinner, from the the sessions afterwards, the after dark, we really had a great time with the folks from Manage.com and getting reintroduced to them again.
You're not sharing the screen.
Am I not sharing the screen? I assumed
sorry.
I was.
I didn't do that.
There we go. We on?
Yep,
What screen?
you're good now.
All right. So with Manage.com, one of the main things that was a takeaway that did happen towards the end of the why? I was like, I can't minimize it. I can't talk and mouse at the same time. All right, so Manage.com. One of the great things that happened at the closing session was they spent a little bit of time talking about the history that they had with the transition and the things that were going on. We all got to know them with really Power DNN, and there was concern early on that Power DNN was going to go away, and they were Manage.com, and we got the official word at the DNN Con in Baltimore that the Power DNN domain was going to stay, and that was a new model that they were going to move forward and keep. That not only was the Power DNN going to stay, but that they'd be updating it and continuing to market underneath that brand and that domain that we know so well. I think you'll see that since then they've even done some updates to the homepage, and so we still see our friends there on the homepage, but they've made some updates. Manage.com, I don't want to forget other sponsors. There are tons of other important folks there, so me jumping over doesn't mean they're not important. It just means I think I talked about that in the last meeting. Sessions were fantastic. Speakers were all fantastic. We had a great time up there, but I wanted to reflect on a couple of different things that I had as a takeaway, and then encouraged David and Clint and Dustin, any of us that went, to shout out and mention some of the things that they had as takeaways. In DNN conventions, whether we're talking about the DNN cons that have been here, our own Southern Fried when he had that, or David, you're heading out to DNN Connect. One of my favorite things about conventions is just what we do here every time we have a user group meeting. We hang out, we talk to each other, we network, we communicate about the hassles that we've had with hosting or the trouble we had with the web.config that one time that XYZ happened. And community and that interaction of community is the biggest takeaway from any of these events. For me, it's really what fuels me to want to go and take any of the members of my crew and team to these meetings and conventions, because I get fueled by those interactions. I may get a client out of it. I may get a new friendship with another development partner, but those things are all secondary, important, but secondary to that networking and community and refueling of energies. Honestly, that's part of why I'm involved and want my company to be involved with Southern Fried and being part of the user group. But going to these conventions, it's one of the main things that I get out of it. So I was really personally excited by the number of different places where in small groups at lunchtime or later on in the evenings around the bar and the pool table, we heard other people talk about wanting to reignite and start up user groups, other user groups around the country. We have seen that in the past there have been many user groups that dwindled because of participation or dwindled because of meeting space and just fizzling out. Some of the bigger kind of longer standing user groups have even gone from having monthly meetings to having quarterly meetings or all online meetings, and we've certainly talked about it and toyed with those kinds of ideas about how we organize them when we do them, but we've honestly seen less participation in user groups on a national scale. And we saw the opposite of that, or got hints of the opposite of that at DNN Con, and that was my favorite takeaway from it. When we would be talking with people and they recognized that myself or maybe David or Dustin or Clint were from Southern Fried, they would say, well, what does it take for us to start our own user group? Ooh, I want to start another user group. And we started keeping track later on. I think I remember 3 or 4 distinct different groups of people reaching out to us and saying, okay, how do we do this? How do we create a user group? I want to make one. And one of the conversations we were having with a guy that was from Dustin, Yeah, he was from Philadelphia area. And basically he said, you know, between my clients that I would want to come to a DNN user group and my developers and my networking groups, I could get 12 to 15 people to come to a DNN user group meeting like that. We're like, fantastic. You'd have an in-person group of people larger than some other user groups. That'd be fantastic. Towards the end of the afternoon, Saturday, kind of the after dark party time, we had some great combinations. I'll back up just a little bit and mention that we did have several participants coming in, from out of the country, and they came in from Nigeria. Cameroon, yes. And that one of our favorites, anecdotes there was that a couple of people met that didn't know each other. They were both from Nigeria, from different locations. One of them's here in the States, and the other one came in, but they were all talking in the bathroom, and we heard this excited exchange, and we're like, they don't know each other. We just kind of assumed they did, but DNN united them together. And through the course of the afternoon and the evening, they were excited about creating a DNN user group. And I said, okay, so are you talking about making a Nigerian .NET user group, Cameroon? He's like, no, we're going to make the whole African. You guys got your little area. We're going to do a whole continent. That's going to be our giant continent user group. They shared some exciting stories, and over the course of the evening, just hearing from all of these different people who wanted to re-engage, to talk about user groups, made me excited, about that aspect again. So anything, if any of those guys are watching here on recordings later or online and I don't see them yet, anything that we can do to help, we would love to help. We'd love to help sponsor you or shepherd you through getting a user group started. I think we tried to connect every one of you to Will Stroll, who I think we could call the grandfather of all user groups, and that he's the source and origin from any point of authority. David?
I mentioned too, just recently Minnesota DNN user group held their first meetup in quite some time.
Fantastic.
And Brad Murray and Eric Hines, are leading that up. They had a person show up, and quite a few of us online show up. So, it's good that start to see more and more activity.
That is fantastic. I didn't actually know that was on. If you let me know when that's on, I'll make sure I'm on the next one or two of that to try and help bolster that from online as well. So I think Will was saying every good user group starts somewhere. So user groups, takeaways from user groups is one of the main things I wanted to kind of re-echo or share with people who weren't at DNN Con. There were some very interesting stories from those guys from Nigeria, and they were talking a little bit about how the government uses DNN and how they're doing some pretty large volume e-commerce transactions. And as we were going through the details, unless I misunderstood, they were doing millions and millions of dollars of transactions every year within a DNN3 instance of an old store system, and that's the level that they can work with server-wise. So if I can reach back out to them again, I told them I'd like to have them on to a user group meeting and kind of make a presentation about what they're doing and what tools they're using and the volume of that. So maybe this will be a reminder to get in touch with them, and we'll see about having them on a future meeting. So user groups is one thing I wanted to mention. If I didn't have time to mention anything else, I wanted to also talk about the survey just a little bit. I was going to pull the survey and the link from the survey from the Twitter location, but it is a Google Doc survey. This is something that we would encourage everybody to fill out because the rest of us who are planning to hold larger community events, we really want to use this data to help us build a better event the next time and the next time and the next time. So if you attended DNN Con, please come and fill out this survey. If you didn't attend DNN Con, please come and fill out this survey. I don't think I'm overreaching or surprising anybody by saying that we've been talking about having another Southern Fried DNN event and having that sometime next year. We haven't made any announcements or any specific posts on dates, but for instance, whether we're having a spring one or a fall one is something that we're deliberating about, and any information that we can glean out of this survey will help make the next DNN Con, whether that's ours or someone else's, even better. So if I didn't mention anything else about conventions, I wanted to make sure that everybody's encouraged and goes through to fill out the survey.
And just real quick, they can get this survey from dnncon.com/survey, or go to dnncon.com and click take the survey.
Yep. Just as another piece of things about conventions, I did want to also kind of spread those rumors, get the ideas going. There was a lot of talk about the next DNN conventions, and I'll back up a little bit about actually being in DNN Con Baltimore. One of the show of hands at one point, I think the closing speaking event, the closing session, they had everyone raise their hands if it was their first DNN Con or DNN conference of any kind, and about 50% of the people who were there raised their hands as that had been the very first convention event that they had attended that was DNN related. And I think that's telling, and I think that's something that speaks a lot to everyone who's planning or thinking about DNN conventions and community events afterwards, is that there was a break. There was a year to a year and a half since the last DNN convention, and many of the people I spoke with were government agency employees, state agency employees, people who were using DNN as part of their daily jobs, and they had supervisors, they had management who said, the next time there's a convention, we'll send you out to it for training. And those people came in for the first preliminary day of training and doing basic user, basic administrator, basic skin and theme development training, and they were waiting for the next convention. It was a year and a half before the next one happened, and therefore there built up some need, and they wondered if it was going to happen again. And I think that kind of lull in between conventions is something that, as a community, we should try and avoid. We should have one every year if we're going to, we might even have two in a year. DNN Connect is on the other side of the pond. It's hard to get to. That's understandable. Ours over here in Baltimore, not everybody can get to that. So some of the conversations that we were having was with other groups to see who would like to host. We're certainly open to hosting one again. It's a load of fun, and we get a lot out of it. So we've promised Charlotte again soon, but we heard some of the other development companies, some of the other sponsors talking about maybe they want to have one. Obviously in Chicago has been mentioned before, but they mentioned having one out at Denver, out in Colorado.
Phoenix.
Yeah, absolutely. Phoenix, Florida and Disney World, having another one out there again. We floated the idea around maybe of having a cruise and having DNN Cruise or DNN Con Cruise. If anybody likes that idea, I'd love to see some feedback show up in the survey. Will Stroll is suggesting Hawaii. I could probably go for a Caribbean cruise or a Mexican cruise before we could get all the way out to Hawaii. But anyways, I think that that's the finish of my wrap up. I do have a long overdue recap article to post onto the Southern Fried website, to post up some photos and things like that. But I'm sure it's not the last word you're going to hear about DNN Con, because it was a lot of fun. There was a lot of networking, a lot of learning. We'll be presenting a little later on some of the new modules or some of the new things that I saw released and presented at DNN Con. So we'll certainly echo DNN Con a bit more over the next few months. David, did you have anything else that you wanted to add in? Clint? Dustin?
I was going to ask, if you scroll down like you did at the beginning when you were looking at sponsors, are those the videos for all the various sessions from Saturday, or what?
That's
as many as were
Mosquito
recorded?
address, as well as all the Ignite sessions.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So-
also all the presentations are out here as well.
That's a really good thing to post or to present, but I'm gonna. This was something I was going to present last session, but I'll present it now here. So these videos were recorded by Adderson. He was in the back of the room and recorded the individual keynotes, the keynote, and some of the presentations. I think you'll see Joe's, looking for right here. There was Joe's Ignite session, so you can catch the 5-minute version of this Outside the Box. But I do want to mention, there we go, Southern Fried. I want to mention the same thing is present on our videos section of the Southern Fried website. we not only have the video from last month's session, but underneath of event videos, we do have those same things that we posted that Addison had passed us, and we posted them to our YouTube channel. So if I hadn't made a shout out about it before, I do want to mention again our video section where you are able to choose the types of videos or types of things you're looking to have that you want to pick up and take a look at. Let's see, event videos being Ignite sessions, so that you can go all the way back to Ignite sessions from previous DNN conventions in DNN World, and you know, some of our favorites out there, such as the everything I learned about UI, I learned from Star Trek, from DNN World in 2012. Shoot, my own should be in there somewhere. But if you don't watch anything else out of DNN Con, you absolutely should watch the Why DNN. Was it not in event videos? Let me hit show all. Why DNN is like an octopus, and that. There we go. Thank you. Why DNN is like an octopus. Ron Miles put together the Ignite session. That's, I think, the first and possibly the last, but it was fantastic. Session that ends with a guitar solo, and Ron certainly pulled that off with style, and he actually made sense with all of the analogies that he made, even while trying to sing through it all. So it's pretty fantastic. So if you don't catch anything else, be sure to watch that one.
And the keynote, of course.
Of course, from our very own Clint Patterson. So Dustin, did you have anything else from DNN Con? All right. David, turn it back over to you for close of the session. All right. Well, thanks very much. Is there anything else online? Will or anybody else in the Peanut Gallery pop-up questions?
Just peanut comments.
Peanut comments, all right.
Well, I'm not the grandfather of anything.
Father of dragons?
Father of DNN user groups? No?
That is a compliment.
It said it's not the grandfather. So
It's just not the grandfather. Like you can put it together if you want.
not the user group OG.
All right, guys. Well, we will go ahead and close out this user group meeting. Thanks very much for everyone participating, both in person and online. We'll be meeting next month, third Thursday of the month as usual. As yet, we're working on our sponsors and our speakers for that particular session. We have a couple of things in ideas, but take a look at our meetup and take a look at the email that we'll send out in just a couple of weeks to let you know exactly what we have on tap for next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.